So, uh, so here, yeah, I see 19 participants already. So, great. So, Natalie, can we start? Yes? Great. Great. So, hello, everybody. Welcome to our first online webinar about CI and CD processes in Qusion. We are super excited to host this event for you and for development community. We prepared this event to share with you our approach, how we work on the development side, how we work with the processes on CI and CD. Together with me here is Mickey Meteski. You will be able to see him right now. So Mickey, can you hear us?
Hi, yeah, hello. Can hear you. Hi all.
Great. So just for the beginning, I will just maybe introduce Qusion, what Qusion do. So Qusion is software development lab, and we are building apps, web apps and mobile apps for clients all over the world. We are based in Prague, and we have also office in Switzerland and Zurich. So we are working with the enterprises and startups and bringing entire solution from the idea to the real product. So from the really first idea of managers, startup founders, to creating a product which we are launching to the market. So we are a small team. We are 20 people right now, and we are doing mobile apps, web apps, backend, UX and UI. And Mickey here, Mickey Miteski, he's right now actually in his hometown in Macedonia, in Skopje, right? We cannot hear you, Mickey. Your
Oh
mic.
yeah, I was muted. Saying hi from Macedonia.
So Mickey,
Yeah.
he just left Prague to a couple of weeks to Macedonia, and he's our Android developer, and he prepared this presentation for you guys to share with the community the approach how we work. And Mickey, now stage is yours, and we are looking for your presentation.
Cool. Thanks, George, for the good introduction, great introduction, and thanks everyone for coming and attending. I'll share my screen now, and we can kick it off. Um, let's see if is everything okay. Hope you can all see it. All throughout the presentation, you can ask questions on chat, or you can join in the link we have in Slido. And then at the end, we'll look through them and answer them all and see what we can do, make it all clear. So what I'm going to be talking about today is our CI and CD process execution, our DevOps processes. About a year or two ago, we started really thinking about this at Qusion. And after all that time of iterating and figuring out new solutions, fine-tuning it, improving it, redoing it a couple of times, we've come up with a system that works really good for us and that we use for all of our products that we have. So what I mean when I say DevOps process or when I say CI or CD, these are essentially systems that we have in place or tools that just really help our development or really improve the lives of our developers. So this goes everything from building and testing the app in a safe environment to deploying to the clients on time, automatically writing the release notes in a nice way. So all those things that the developer needs to care about that are not really development, we have a chance of making all of that automated and making all of that a solid system that works together with like a lot of tools. And I think this is really essential for project of any scale, really essentially for projects, or especially rather for projects that are maybe on a bigger scale. So let's dive in and see what we have. So this is a photo of me working in the offices in Prague, but George already talked about me, so we're just gonna skip this slide. All right, so before I dive into what we have and show you the code and so on and show you our processes, I want to quickly touch into what kind of tools are we using to accomplish all of this. Maybe some of you are familiar. We're actually going to launch some polls in chat where you will have a chance to say maybe what kind of systems do you use, or are you familiar with any of these? So we're going to start with Bitrise. What is Bitrise? Is just a place where we can run builds and test our products or apps in a really safe environment. This maybe you've heard of Travis CI. There's GitLab CI. So these are a whole solution where it just gives you some containers where you can run your code and test your code continuously, and so on. Run builds and workflows. We'll dive deeper into what it actually is. We're also heavily using Fastlane. Maybe some of you have heard about it. Um, this is just like a really easy way to run some scripts either locally or in a CI environment or in a Docker environment somewhere in the cloud. This kind of gives you really plenty of options and has tons of integrations with a lot of things that you already use, like Slack maybe, has tasks for Gradle, has, if you're developing on Android, a bunch of different, for Firebase as well, a bunch of different integrations that are just massively useful and save a lot of time. I will show here directly just a snippet of the code that we have. So you write all these things for the fast lane in this file, where you essentially um, just call some scripts or just integrate with a lot of things that you use. We'll dive into this a bit later on. It's really simple and really easy to use. And I think everyone should kind of really dig into that, or to at least try it out. It works for simple things. It also works for like a lot more complicated things. And the next tool that we use is Firebase. And I hope some of you have heard about Firebase. It also has like tons of different uses for your apps, especially for people developing mobile and web dev. Definitely, as we heard of Firebase, it has crash analytics, performance, analytics for your apps, has some databases and so on, like a really great solution to use. But what we're essentially using, or what I'm going to be showcasing now, is these two features here. The app distribution feature, where it allows you to distribute your builds to a specific group of people, testers or internally in your company, and also the test lab feature, which I think is really, really cool, which allows you to just run UI tests on a device that they have already in their own cloud. This is a really cool thing, and we use it heavily in all our projects. Um, what UI tests are just essentially clicking through your app or through your product and seeing how it behaves directly from the UI side, in comparison to what unit tests are, where you're testing some functionality of your app. This is kind of like a high-end testing, where automatically buttons and fields are clicked for you, and you're checking if it behaves properly. This is really important for any kind of product, and especially for mobile. And Firebase makes it really easy to use it and utilize it. So we kind of take advantage of that. All right, cool. So let's dive into continuous integration first. Why this is important and how do we solve this? It's nothing big here. I think a lot of companies and a lot of products have some sort of CI solution in place. So this is essentially continuously building and testing your app or your product in an environment that's not local, that's not on anyone's local machine, but it runs on some sort of safe environment in the cloud. And this is where we use Bitwise. So Bitwise has a way to hook into your repository, and it triggers some builds whenever you push remotely or whenever you try and make a pull request and so on. I have this CUNY sample repository. All of this, I should have mentioned this actually earlier, that all of this is open source. Then you can just check it out on your own time and really dig into how are all of these scripts set up and so on. So I have Bitrise hooked to this project here. It's open sourced on GitHub, and whenever something is pushed remotely or whenever there's a pull request, there's some sort of workflow that starts running. They're called workflows in Bitwise, and they're just a series of steps that we control that are being performed on the app that is being built somewhere on some sort of safe environment in the cloud. So what do we essentially want to do? What's the main goal of this? Every time there's a piece of code or changes being pushed remotely to the repository, we want to check if they're good, if the app runs, or if the unit tests are passing, or any kind of test that you have. So this is a really good place to put those kind of logic in there, that kind of logic in there. So what this step does, it just builds your app and runs the unit tests every time you try and make some changes to your remote repository, which is really good. This kind of keeps the code safe and keeps it error prone, keeps the unit tests running. So you cannot really merge anything or put anything remotely into your main branches that is kind of corrupted or not good, or there's something obviously wrong with it. So here we come back to Fastlane, and why do we use Fastlane in combination with Bitwise? And Fastlane was this solution, this little tool that allows you to run some scripts. So this is gonna kind of be a bit Android specific when I'm talking about Fastlane, but the idea is the same for either iOS or web, or maybe any kind of product that you're developing in any kind of languages. Fastlane has support for it, and it will be changed up a bit in how your lanes are structured, but the idea stays the same. So if some of you are Android developers, you've definitely heard of Grail tasks. So what this lane literally does is run all your unit tests on the debug build type, and assembles the app. Basically, just builds the app on the cloud remotely. So if all of this passes, all of this is correct and good, then our builds are passing, and we can merge the code remotely. This is not by any means, okay, if this is good, then everything is good. Of course, there's some code reviews and so on of the functionality, but this is kind of like a really necessary baseline, just so some tiny little mistake doesn't get out there in all the main branches that you have or in the product that you're building. So this is really a safe net, and it saves a lot of time of developers, especially if you're writing a lot of unit tests and you would really want to keep them updated. So there's nothing major or big happening here, just writing the unit test. This little piece we'll talk about later. For people who've heard about Danger, they know it's pretty cool. So we'll talk a little bit about it later if we have some time. But for now, we just kind of skip it, and we'll come back to it later on. Okay, cool. Let me just quickly check the chat if there's some issues. Um, okay, seems to be good. In case there's anything like you can't hear me or there's some issues with the audio, feel free to write in chat questions and everything else. All right, cool. So now we go back into a bit of a more interesting topic. That's just distribution of your builds. So this maybe can vary from company to company, but I think what we have and what kind of requirements that we have when we're working with clients can be really easily applicable to a lot of different companies. And so what we actually realized that we needed, a lot of these things are coming from some issue that we were facing and trying to figure out a solution for that. So what kind of requirements that we have usually when working with clients is that we need to distribute builds really quickly. And what this first section I'm going to be talking about, the builds that we distribute internally. So this essentially, if we have some internal testers in the company, or the design team wants to check it, product wants to check it, then we have like a really easy way to communicate between them instead of just plugging different phones into your app and then showing them builds directly there. So this is like a very, I think this is like the most useful system that we have in place that we found throughout all this time developing, and then it really helps to keep everyone updated and to keep everyone just kind of on the same page when we're doing a product. So what do we want to achieve? This is where Firebase comes in place. Firebase distribution, essentially, we want to distribute a build to some group of people. In this case, we'll talk about our internal testers, probably in the company, um, and so they can just like test the build and check it and see if there's something wrong with it. This works really good for apps, also I guess for web as well. So for example, in Qusion, the design team really wants to check the app as much as possible, also product as well. So this is like a really good place to do that. So what app distribution does, what Firebase app distribution does, is allows you to upload an APK, which is just this format that Android builds the app into, and like almost instantly, people who are in the internal tester group, they can have the build downloaded on their phones, run it, test it, and so on. So I will go to the workflow that we have for that. This is deploy internal. So this is a bit more spread out, a bit more in depth maybe. And the first thing we would want to do, we don't need to care about these steps. These are kind of like basic steps that Bitwise has, that we need to activate some keys, so we need to clone the repository and pull it and so on. So these are like normal steps that every workflow has. So, but these are the three interesting ones. Here we have a build internal test step, where we just essentially build the app. I will show the step in Android Studios, where we essentially build the app as we do, run the tests, build the app, and configure something for the test lab, which we'll look at later. And what do we want to do? What's our main goal with this app that's like now nice, as in it builds nicely, the tests run, so it's pretty much safe to distribute it. We now go to deploying to Firebase. And these are what I mentioned about the integrations that Fastlane has, is there's just a single plugin that you can add where you write some release notes and you write what the group is and the APK path and so on. So it basically gets your app that's built in there in the cloud and distributes it to Firebase. I will show you how it looks now on the side of the developers and the product that is, or the people that are testing it. So they have this app tester component here where they can see all the builds that have been happening with the date they've been released and the release notes that are being featured. We'll get back to this bit later on. So they can just really easily open the app on their phones, download the latest version, and they will just have it instantly on their apps. So we found that it's a really easy and really cool solution, and it helped like a ton with what we were doing. So definitely recommend checking this out. I know there's a way to do this to internal groups in Google Play, but we found it was much faster, and this was a smoother solution, and a very necessary solution. And what I mean by nightly builds, actually didn't mention this. We found that it's kind of really important to have the latest version, especially when you're doing rapid development, to have the latest version every day. So we're doing some development. The programmers who are working on the app for Android and iOS, we merge everything to the developer branch and so on. And then at the end of the day, or we have it like in the middle of the night at 4 a.m. in the morning. There's a build that is being scheduled every day that runs on the develop branch. It builds it and it deploys it. So every morning, the whatever your internal testers, designers, or product, they get up and they have a freshly new build to test or to check out. So that just keeps everyone on the same page. They know exactly which features are in the app, and the communication is so much easier after having all that done. Um, all right, so that kind of brings us to client builds. The other requirement that we had, and I kind of think that a lot of people do have that work on client projects, is that they have some group of testers that want to test the app, but they don't necessarily need to do that every day, or they don't want to do it every day. So this will kind of be on-demand distribution to a different group of people. We actually have it every 2 weeks, but it depends on the requirements and so on. It could be every week, it could be every couple of days. So this is a manual build that takes the app, builds it, runs the test, and deploys also to Firebase distribution that we saw just now, but to a different group of testers. This is really important because we can pollute, or like we can have as many debug builds as we can in the company internally, but I guess, or yeah, better is for the clients that they're seeing like much bigger steps in your development process. So that means like every 2 weeks, there's essentially some new features and lots of new things they can test. And these are people that are not from the company. So it is really important is to be like a clean process, and also like automate as much as possible, just so we don't waste that developer's time dealing with everything that's just not development. So I'll show you now how do we deal with this requirement. What do we have in place for that? So this is our deploy client workflow. It is essentially the same as our deploy internal. It's just triggered manually, and has these two steps that are the same. We'll get back to this UI tests later on. So it just builds the app for the client, and it deploys it to a client group in Fastlane. Sorry, in Firebase. So how that looks in code, really briefly. There's a bit of a catch here, so where I'm going to talk about it now, but it essentially builds the app, signs it, writes the release notes, and distributes it, deploys it to Firebase. So this was a bit tricky to do, and initially we had a debug build released to the clients, but we really needed a way to test release builds. So by release builds, I mean builds that are signed, and they have all the kind of configurations that we have in place for release builds. So this is essentially what is going to be released to the end users kind of at the end, or when the app is public. So this was a really good place to test that. And what do we do in order, what do we need in order to accomplish that? We need so this is kind of maybe a bit specific for Android, but similarly applies to iOS and also possibly other products that you have. But we do need a debug build and a release build, and we realized that we do really need to test both of them thoroughly while we're developing. And what we do need for that, how Android works, is there's a key store file, like an encrypted file that you sign the app with, so that it kind of knows where it's coming from and so on. These are like kind of security systems in place. And we save that key store, that saved key store, in Bitwise. This is a really cool feature from Bitwise that I really dig, is that you can upload a file in their generic file storage, where you can have your key store. And also there's some secret variables that are only accessible, are kind of safe within within Bitwise. They're not public anywhere. So these are important tokens, like the alias for the key store and the password and so on. So all those things needed to kind of decrypt that key store and use it to sign your app with it. Um, and yeah, there's a really cool place where you can save them as kind of environmental variables in Bitwise, and we found it's like really easy to use, and kind of like it just came in naturally with what we had in mind. They're made for this kind of solution to work. Um, so that kind of settles the signing of the app part. I have this little script here, which scrapes the release notes. So we'll dig into that a bit more. I think this is a pretty cool thing to have, and a really important thing to kind of think about. And we've tried like a bunch of different solutions for this, but this what we have right now I think works really nicely, and it's kind of really clean to use. So whenever we would do a beta release or a client release, um, we write some changes. We write the changes that we did. So why is this important? Because an external tester opening the app needs to see what he needs to be testing about. So what are the new features that have just come out with this version? And that's one reason. That reason is just kind of it's readable, and every 2 weeks or so we know at what stage are we, and all of that comes from a single document, which is kind of really neat. And so whenever we would do a release, whenever we would push to some sort of beta branch or client branch and so on, we would have this changelog file updated to the new version, and also all the new features that we have, all the bug fixes, all the changes. This can be as detailed as you would want it to be. Like it really depends on what stage the product is or how big the product is. So it's kind of really it's really up to the developers and up to the products that they're developing to make it as big as possible. Why is this in a YAML format? That's kind of um, one of the kind of neat tricks that we figured out would work. So what was the idea behind having this in a YAML format, in this kind of format, and not just a simple maybe markdown file? Is because it's really good if this changelog YAML is kind of like a single source of truth about your changelogs. So whenever this is updated, we have a script that runs, takes the latest version, and whenever we're deploying or building the release version, it puts up that version as the version name of the app, and also takes all the release notes that we have here and the date and puts them in the description in the Fastlane distribution. So everything comes from a single source instead of us writing it down separately in GitHub or GitLab, whatever solution that you use, or writing it separately in another README file, or just kind of writing it in the app distribution, Firebase distribution place, updating the version by yourself. Like none of that. Everything comes from a single place, and it's really important to just kind of keep it neat and readable with this kind of format. So these are these two scripts that we have. It's just essentially a Python script that takes this YAML, parse it. You don't need to look through it now. All this is open source. You can check it out. And it just gets it, parse it, takes the latest version, takes all the new features that we've added there, and just kind of crumbles it all together and has it in the Firebase distribution. So I will show you how it looks like at the very end, or actually essentially what the clients see. So the client group of testers, they don't have these debug builds there. So what they see is this. So they have this piece um, where they can see all the features that are being added, and they can immediately download it, and it's signed, um, and you can just a proper way to test it. We also have these builds internally, of course, to just test it ourselves. It's really important to test your release builds especially if you have some sort of um, obfuscation of your code and so on. Like we found that, especially if you have these lines of code for people that are doing Android, it's really important to test your release builds. Um, and this is kind of like a really readable way to see your progress and for client testers to see your progress of the app. So that's the solution that we have for that part. Let me come back to the Fastlane file. Um, this piece here just sets the version code that we just talked about, and this builds the app with the release build type, and then deploy client is being called, where you just essentially distribute this app to the group of testers that are the clients. A really cool thing about Firebase distribution is that you can have multiple groups for different types of testers that you have, either internal testers of your company, client testers outside. So it can be really extensible and really suitable to whatever the needs are. Um, okay, cool. So now we're coming back to um, kind of the thing that we've been skipping in all these steps. It's the UI tests that we see in these like deploy workflows that we have in Bitwise. So I'm gonna talk a bit about that. It's not really, it makes it really easy to use, um, but it's such an important thing. So we'll dig into that a bit. Um, maybe I'll just check chat, which has nothing new. It's good. So let's get back to Bitwise, and let's check it here. So there's a step that Bitwise provides, which is integrated with Firebase Test Lab. Firebase Test Lab is this place where you can upload an APK, and it will run some pre-configured or randomly UI actions on your app. It's really cool, and it's essentially like really easy to set up, but it gives you a lot. It can also be massively extensible. I'm not gonna spend too much time on it. Um, this is just like a very basic setup that I have here, but it can be as complex as needed, depending if the app is big or how many devices you want to test it, and so on. The cool thing about it, what we use is this test devices. So you can essentially say what kind of test devices do you want your app to be run on, with all the resolution size and so on. So this essentially just builds the app on this exact device that they have there, with the exact Android version, exact resolution, and it tries to click through all your buttons and input text to the fields and see if something like weird breaks. This is kind of like a very baseline thing. This is what testers would do, but in an automated way. Not as good as human testing, but it is kind of like, if you could have it, then just why not have it? We haven't included it in the primary workflow on our continuous integration workflow, because it just kind of takes a lot of time for all those devices to be built and run. So it stops a lot of the kind of rapid development process that we have for a lot of people do. So that's why it's just in these deploy builds, or so essentially it runs every night. So the UI tests run every night together with the deploy internal workflow, and they just kind of, they're a really good way to just check your app once per day. You can also run them manually if you would need to. So um, it's just like a really clean way to do that. And I have this like configuration file here where we define what kind of devices that we want the test to run on. This is just some random thing that I've put in for no reason, but if there's some specific requirements from for the app should, or what kind of device your app should run on, then you can put them all here, and they will just run in the cloud. It's really neat. It's really cool. It's really easy to set up, which is pretty important, and it's just like a nice thing to use in your deploy builds, or something that's not run every time you push something to the remote code. Um, all right, great. Let's see what's next. Pre-push Git hooks. Um, So this is something that I found that is really useful. Um, Git hooks are just a piece of code that runs some script that runs before some sort of Git command. Um, we have a pre-push Git hook, and what it does, so this is before you would want to push something from your local machine remotely, it runs some script. So what it runs, what we have it configured to run, rather, it just runs linting, and it runs some sort of scripts to check the schema. I will go to it now. Um, we kind of wanted to include linting in our CI environments or in Bitrise, but I think this is like a much kind of like a quicker or a nicer way to save a lot of time, because sometimes you would just change, you would maybe miss some sort of code style, but then this will catch it before you even push remotely, instead of like running the whole build, catching like a tiny error that you would need like 5 seconds to fix, and then rerunning it again. So this runs linting locally on your machine before you even push remotely, which I found it to be like a really kind of like a time saving thing. And it's really good. It's really like important to run linting. So linting basically just checks your code style for some weird indentations and so on. So if I would have um if I would just maybe have like a lots of white space, or have something here, um it would not allow me to push this, because it's just not as not in within the rules of what the code style should be. So these are defined and so on. So this is, we use KT-lent, which you can check out, but there are a bunch of different solutions for linting for Android, and this is specifically for Kotlin lints. So it just really keeps your code kind of safe and readable for everyone in the same style. It's important when a lot of people are working on the same project. So this is how a pre-push script looks like. So it's running KT-lint here. If it fails, it shows you some warning, and then you can run a simple Gradle command to kind of clean it up. And what another interesting thing that we have here is a script to check your schema. So this is a schema. If some of you have been working with Apollo or GraphQL, I'll not spend time on this, just really quickly. It's just a schema that you get from your backend, and it generates all your data classes and so on. So for people who've been working with GraphQL, this is like a really regular thing. And what we found is that every time we push remotely, we want that schema to be up to date with what backend has. So every time before we push, we would check if the local schema that we have in our app is the same as the local schema, as the schema that is in the backend right now. So we fetch it and we compare it, and if they're the same, then yeah, we can push. If not, then we really need to update the schema, and then run the app, see if there's something wrong with it, and then push again once everything is cool. Um, in our projects, we run one more script here in the pre-push file, where we check some strings, some localized strings, if everything is up to date to the backend. So these are like a really cool place to have a bunch of different things that you need to like quickly check before you push. It depends on what kind of product it is, but like I think KT-lint is linting is a very general thing, definitely should have, and everything else just kind of depends on what the product is, and so on. If there can be like a bunch of different ideas to have here, it all just really depends. Um, all right. So that's the part about the pre-push Git hooks. Yeah, so we've kind of come into conclusion. I actually have no idea how long have I been talking. I hope it wasn't too much. Um, So what we discussed is our continuous integration systems that we have in place that really keep our code kind of safe and our unit tests running constantly. Then we discussed the nightly builds with Firebase distribution, a really cool feature, especially during the stage of development where you have some people that really probably internally in your company that need to have those builds really quickly. Um, so that's like a really good solution to have to nightly distribute the builds to all your testers. Also clients builds with including these neat release notes that you write up and all this logic about the changelog YAML file. Um, that is pretty important. It can also depend if there's some sort of requirements like that in your company, but it can be changeable and so on. But the idea about having the single source of your latest version code and all your release notes in a single document in this like changelog YAML file, it's kind of really appealing. And just a general good practice about dealing with changelogs and versioning and writing release notes. So maybe you can like spruce up some different ideas in different parts of your processes. And then we looked at the UI tests in Firebase Test Lab. Just again, really easy to set up. They give a bunch of values, and they can be really extensible. You can write your own commands of or like which buttons you would want it to be clicked. So depending on just kind of what kind of level of engagement do you want them to be with. They're kind of slow, so don't put them in your primary builds. Put them in some like once per day kind of builds. And these need pre-push Git hooks where they save a lot of time. Where you run linting, you can add a bunch of different scripts in there that are just depending on your project. So all of these things and all these tools in just kind of bashed together, combined together, they give what like what DevOps processes we have in Qusion, and they're all there to just kind of help us developers focus on developing instead of focusing about all these different things. And I think every product just deserves some time spent in the very beginning thinking about these things and just seeing how far can they reach and how many more things can we make manual and how many more can we make smoother, nicer. It all comes just from like a need basis, is what I think. And it's really important to think about this. And a cool thing about this is that this can be reused for any project in the future. So once you set up once, then it's just gonna take you like 5-10 minutes to set up for the next project. So it's like you think about it once, but you gain like lots of value as it goes on, and then you improve it, you tweak it a bit, um, and so on. So thank you everyone for listening to this talk, and I hope there's gonna be some ideas being born from this, and I hope you liked it. And I can't wait to hear your questions and your suggestions or your comments. Feel free to shoot them here on Slido. And yeah, again, thank you all for listening. Been great.
Amazing, Mickey. Thank you very much for your amazing talk. And we have a bunch of questions here in the Slido.
Mm-hmm.
So let's
Mm-hmm.
start with the first. Maybe you can start sharing your screen, maybe. And can we see detailed test results or maybe testing videos of on Test Lab? Is it
Um,
possible?
let me just open the Slido, and I will get you back on that. I just need the link. Okay, so yes, we can see detailed test results. I don't know if I have it here set up, but it actually looks pretty extensive. I will show you here. I will just share my screen now. Okay. So this is how it looks like. I hope you can see my screen. This is how it looks like. Um, just how detailed it is for what it's doing. So this is because the app I have is pretty small, like two screens only. It's a simple app of some architecture that we have in Qusion. So it literally tells you what kind of elements it clicks, where does it go from next, and so on, and what was the performance. You can have screenshots from there, logs. There's even a video of how they're actually clicking out there. So they show you the manufacturer version, and I don't know if I can find it there, but it essentially gives you all this like crawl graph where this automated system is clicking through your app and going through different screens and finding out different weird interactions and so on. So it disables all animations and just starts clicking everywhere and finding all the buttons and clicking for you. And you can like really customize this. You can tell it with doing which buttons to click on and so on. So yeah, there is an option like that. I hope that answers the question.
It's great, Nikki. Thank you. The second question, you mentioned the monkey testing on Firebase Test Lab. How are espresso tests performing on Test Lab for end-to-end testing or check happy paths?
Okay, so espresso tests. So this is essentially just a UI test. So they are run using a Gradle command, but these tests that I mentioned um, in the test lab, they're just big UI tests. Well, I guess yeah, there are espresso roboelectric tests where you can like click through it. So basically, um, I guess it is the same answer as before. You could write down which elements do you want it to click. So I will show you how. Maybe that's what you guys are hinting at. Um, if you would want to write robo tests, you can write the initial activity, the depth, the steps, the directives, and the scenarios to check all your happy paths and all the paths that you think that, yeah, this is the path that I definitely need to test, instead of allowing just the test to like randomly click on elements. You could specify a series of elements where you would need to click through that in order to see if your app behaves nicely. And these are the targets, orchestrations, and so on. So there's like a bunch of different things. There's something for game development as well, which I haven't really dig into. But this is the places where you would write a sequence of required actions that Robo should perform when it's doing its crawl. I hope that answers it. Um, I know that you can write UI tests, in your app, which are better for different reasons. But it is like it's better because it's there in its code and you can see it, you can change it. It's like much easier to control. This is a bit more, if you don't want to spend too much time on UI tests, you can get a really easy solution with like minimum of effort. But if you're really big on UI tests, then yeah, definitely then writing them on device, in your repository and running them, it would be, I guess, a better solution. I just like a single idea, but if there's a preference, then
Great,
sure, go for that.
great. So the next question is, how are the build times compared to local machine? Does it take longer compared to your machine?
Yes, it does. Like in general, it does take longer. It all kind of obviously depends on the size of the project, but because here it just really needs to kind of spin up the whole Docker image and build all the kind of Android SDKs that are missing and so on. It takes a bit more time. So they go for starting projects. They go from like 4 to 5 6 minutes for just building, for running the tests and building the app. From what I found, and it doesn't get ridiculously big as the app grows. Um, it might get up to, I think we have like 7 8 minutes in some of our bigger projects, maybe 10 minutes tops. Um, so they are they are slower than running and building your app locally, of course. But you get the benefits of like them being kind of built in a safer environment and so on, and
Great.
build them manually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Mickey. The next question is, why not build and run the script directly on Bitrace instead of using Bitrace to trigger Fastlane?
Okay, so one of these things is what we actually changed from the very beginning. We had all these steps that we have kind of combined in Fastlane. We have them as steps in Bitrise, but I think one of my colleague was really kind of frustrated about how slow Bitrise is, and like just typing things out here and adding steps here and moving them around and testing them out. It was kind of slow, and he kind of had this idea of having them in a file where it can be version controlled. So we tried to not, instead of adding a Android build step and then Android test step and so on. Instead of having that here and like 5, 6 steps in our workflows, we kind of combine them in a single Fastlane step that can have multiple commands in there. And that's good for like multiple reasons. Maybe it's a bit of a preference thing. Maybe if you're used to writing the steps in Fastlane, then yeah, that's good. If that works for you, then that is great. But here we could have this single file, single Fastlane file, where it can be like really easily shared in different projects. It's like just copy it from here and add it to a new project, and you have it up and running, instead of just messing around here with the steps and so on. It kind of gets really tedious because like Bitwise can get a bit clunky and slow, and moving it around, typing things out here, or like just typing script commands here can get really tedious. So that is why we decided to use Fastlane and have it like this, because you could have multiple calls in a single lane that you would need. Um, so so that's essentially the reason why, but it's completely valid if you would have all the steps here
Yep, yep.
in the workflow editor. Cool.
Great, great. Next question. Why not using GitHub auto versioning and reading PR description as a changelog message? Since
Okay.
macro change on files can contain mistakes.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. And we kind of figured that, yeah, if there's like a really good incentive, or like a really good kind of culture that you write PR messages and commit messages and so on like really nicely and thoroughly what they are, then yeah, then maybe that's worth including all of that into your new features, or so on, and having that in your changelog file automatically pulled from your PR requests. But um, what we found is that we kind of wanted more control into what the clients are testing about in our new versions being released. So writing them manually um, was kind of giving us a bit more control into what we want to write. So we would just look at ClickUp or Jira or whatever kind of thing that we're using, and just look through the tickets, what we've done, and just type them all out. It's not taking a lot of time. It could be error prone, but that's why we have Danger in place, which I'll just mention really briefly now. What saves us from being massively error prone. And so kind of like, it's a valid approach to scrape the PR messages, um, but I think maybe it's a bit of a preference thing, and having more control into what you write for your new features and changes and so on, and what the client testers see while they're testing. So what I said by danger here is that this is literally a bot in your repository that runs something and checks something on a pull request. So what we found really useful to check is that whenever you're pushing from a develop branch to a beta or a client branch that you would want to release to the clients, then it checks if you've changed the changelog. So that way you're not like very kind of forgetting about the changelog, or like not really doing it properly whenever you're pushing a new version to the clients. So this just it's kind of really simple what it looks like. I'm not gonna go in depth about it. It could be used for lots and lots of different things. Um, sorry, but what it does is just like checks if the branch that you're merging to is beta, and checks if the modified files include changelog. So this is basically if you're merging to this beta branch that we have for our clients, is that kind of you gotta change the changelog if you want to release. So that's like a tiny little safe thing that we have in there, and also a bunch of other things like you only merge from master to master from beta and so on. So yeah, it's kind of really cool how Danger works, and it can be used for like lots of different things to make your PRs nicer and so on. And we do have some of them in our production apps, but like here, just for the sake of this, I just have these things here. It's actually like a really cool thing to use, and it integrates well with Bitrise and so on. So yeah, I hope that answers it. Mm. I don't know
Great,
if there are any
great.
questions in
Thank
chat.
you. With no more questions tonight.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much for amazing presentation. if there's no more question in Slido or in the chat, no more question, I see. So yeah, that was our webinar today. Thank you very much, Mickey, for a great
Thanks,
presentation.
guys. Yeah.
You'll be able to find this presentation online on YouTube really soon. So all the participants on Zoom and Facebook probably will receive the link where you can see again the presentation. And thank you very much for joining us on Zoom and Facebook. And we are looking forward to see you again in near future on our next event. So
Yeah.
good night and stay safe in the difficult time. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.